I want to move on to Arsenal, who a lot of their fans were flying high a few weeks ago. No win in 3 games, struggling to put the ball in the back of the net. The name on the tips of all of their tongues is Ivan Toney, this potential £100 million deal. Chelsea are also linked to the player. What is the likelihood of Ivan Toney to Arsenal or any other goal scorer joining in this window, in your opinion, Ben, based on what you've heard?
Well, I think Toney's admired by Arsenal, but it's nothing more than that at this stage. So admiration doesn't mean offer or transfer. And I think it's pretty unlikely that Toney will leave unless he does a sort of Caicedo and throws his toys out the pram, which would be a nuts move given that Brentford have looked after him during the ban. He's training well, according to sources, and he'll now be eligible in mid-January. So the priority for Toney is game time. And moving mid-season when he might be a bit rusty as far as match sharpness is concerned is going to be a big, big challenge. And to facilitate the move, Brentford's asking price has to be hit as well. And that's out of Arsenal's budget. So I think Toney is going to be one to watch more for the summer. And we can't rule out 2 other possibilities. One is that he signs a new deal and there's a release clause. But the complication there is that Toney would want higher wages than Brentford would probably be prepared to pay. Second possibility is that he ends up leaving on a free transfer in 2025 and then Brentford ultimately get another season out of Toney and he puts this whole betting ban behind him and gets back to scoring ways. I suppose Arsenal fans will be saying, and it is a very neat narrative, but with Raya, Brentford eventually gave us a structure that suited financial fair play. Why can't they do the same with Toney? Why can't they give us the player in a way that ends up giving them the money, but gives Arsenal a structure that's in keeping with financial fair play? And I think that's a very neat narrative, but it implies that Brentford are going to kind of step aside or bend over and give Arsenal everything they want. And Brentford have got all the cards here. The other thing with Toney that people forget is that Wissa's gone to AFCON and Mbeumo's injured. So Brentford need Toney more than ever because they're sliding in the wrong direction. So when you add up all of those points, I just don't see Toney going in January. And if he was to go, you're looking at a minimum of £80 million. And some say that it will even be closer to 100 million as a so-called January asking price. So that takes Arsenal out of the equation. So Toney to Arsenal is one to watch in the sense that Toney would welcome an offer from Arsenal. And were they to make a January offer, then who knows? Toney might exert a little bit of pressure. But I just don't think Arsenal will move in January for Toney. So I think this is something that we'll be revisiting in the summer. And then I think that Thomas Partey's out, obviously, at the moment. And even though Jorginho's there, let's wait and see whether Arsenal look to strengthen in a different area. Zubimendi, I'm not sure about because he had reservations about moving to Arsenal for his development. And I'm not sure whether mid-season will be possible, especially because Sociedad are doing really well in Europe as well. But there's no doubt that he was a target. And Douglas Luiz is hugely admired. But again, Sociedad are doing well. They want to hang on to their players. We spoke before about Leverkusen doing well. They want to hang on to their players. Nice are doing well. They want to hang on to their players. And guess what? Aston Villa are doing well. They want to hang on to their players. So this is that point I made before, which is always forgotten in January because the window opens and everyone thinks sign, sign, sign. But I reiterate what I said before. The January window is difficult because it is fast and it is a seller's market. And therefore, if Brentford name a price for Toney, there's no time for haggling, negotiation, games. If Brentford say, we want 80 to 100 million, and Arsenal say, that's just not something that we're prepared to pay or can pay under financial fair play, then it's game over. You move on. You've not got time to mess about. You've not got time to play games. You've not got too much time to get into a negotiation unless you believe that when you get into that quick negotiation, the price is going to drop significantly. And I don't think that Arsenal would enter the race for Toney in January unless they thought that it was 50 to 60 million. And I think 80 million is the bare minimum. So I don't think that Toney will move in January to anybody, but certainly not Arsenal because it's just not financially feasible for them. But then if he's obviously still at Brentford come the end of the season, let's see what Arsenal do. The final thing I want to say is that if Arsenal were to bring in a striker, then it would be an indication that they might start listening to offers for Eddie Nketiah. If they keep Nketiah, it probably tells you that they're not looking to spend big on a forward in this window. Mm-hmm. They'll stick with what they've got. They'll revisit it in the summer. So that might be a clue. If Nketiah is sold to, for example, Crystal Palace, who are one of the clubs that are genuinely looking at him, alongside PSG's Hugo Ekitike for Crystal Palace, then Arsenal might get some money. Then Arsenal will have a spot available for a striker. And if they sell Nketiah, it might tell you that there is a target there that they think they can pull off in January to effectively replace Nketiah. But if Nketiah is not sold, then Arsenal might just wait until the right target becomes available. And that might mean being patient until summer 2024.
Yeah, Arsenal fans don't appear overly patient at the moment, Ben. They obviously want to try and win this Premier League title. The view is from a lot of Gooners that I've spoken to, a lot that we get in the comments, is if we don't sign a prolific striker in January, this season is over in that regard. But I suppose if you can't get that prolific striker at the right price in January, you have to think more long-term for the club. Instead of paying 30, 40 million pounds over the odd, which I know a lot of football fans have this notion of it ain't my money, I don't care. But that will essentially stop you from signing another additional player at some stage down the line, which you are going to need as well. So I suppose there is that element of, I know everybody wants to win in the here and now. That need for instant gratification is huge. But at the same time, you can't, I'm not an advocate of overspending on players, because at some point when you burn the candle at both ends, we know what happens to football clubs and also general people in life. So they've got to get that right. But I think Arsenal fans will be disappointed if they get to the end of January and there are no good quality additions into their squad. I do think there's going to be a lot of frustration from their fans, to be fair.
Yeah, I think so. But I also don't understand why fans have this collective clamour, as you say, to buy. And if they know a bit less about the player, they get excited about any signing and they correlate the success of that signing with a few YouTube clips and the price tag. But if it was a car and you were buying it, and I said to you, you want to buy a car in 2024, and there's a 5-year-old car available on the market for 10 grand. It's a little bit bashed up, but it's relatively reliable. It might not be your first choice, but it's available. And it means that you can get a new car now, even though maybe what you've got is fine.
Yeah.
Or if you wait until summer, then for 15 grand, only 5 grand more, I give you a brand new Ferrari. In that kind of situation, everyone would say, well, I would be nuts to buy the 5-year-old second-hand car. And of course, it's never that clear cut in football transfers. But, you could make an argument of, do you buy Ivan Toney now, or do you get Osimhen in the summer? And I'm by no means calling Osimhen a 5-year-old bashed up second-hand car. But my point is that if you're comparing the two like for like, maybe there's a debate there to be had. But I think many would say wait for Osimhen. And if obviously it was a little bit more extreme, for example, if we go back to Manchester United and I said to you, do you want a new sort of model on the market that could be really exciting, but is not that predictable as to how it will develop in terms of popularity? That's Rasmus Højlund. And if you'd have genuinely said this possibility wasn't around, so it's purely hypothetical to make a point. But if I basically said to you, do you want to buy Højlund now, as Manchester United did, or do you want to wait 6 months and get Kane? And again, that wasn't a possibility, so this is purely hypothetical. Every single Manchester United supporter, when given a choice between Højlund and Kane, would have said, of course we need to wait for Kane if we can only get one of them. But somehow when the window opens, fans are more inclined to say, but we're wobbling. But our league position might suggest that we're moving in the wrong direction. So we need a stopgap. We need an immediate fix now. And recruitment teams can't get sucked into that public clamour. Otherwise, they might spend their budget on a mistake and then not be able to get the actual long-term solution later down the line.
And I'm not defending Arsenal per se here, because I actually think the one thing I do look at is the owners. And if you are close to FFP, they haven't invested anything. They can invest £100 million today if they wanted towards player transfers, because they're allowed to put £100 million in every 3-year cycle. So the owners of Arsenal could fix this problem if it's an FFP issue instantly. That I get challenging. But in terms of panicking and let's just pay it, look what Man United did with Anthony as an example. Now, I know Ivan Toney will be more of a success than Anthony, but that's a £25 million player that we messed up on so bad that we dropped £90 million on. That means we're from an FFP perspective, if we'd have got him for 25 million and he flopped, there'd still be 65, 70 million to invest. You could maybe go out and get Elise now. You could go, right, we'll pay above the odds. You could go out and buy, a lot of players talk about Bakayoko. I don't know how good this guy's going to be. I've only seen him play twice. But you could go into the market now with that extra money and get it done. You do need to be mindful of not overpaying. I don't believe you should overpay in the pursuit of a trophy now. At the same time, you should, in my opinion, demand that your owners invest money, do whatever they can to raise the funds that are needed. So I do think there's a happy medium in these conversations. But as ever on social media, it's always very one-track minded in terms of just get it done now, as opposed to thinking bigger picture. But that's football. Mbappe 2024. Where's he going? That's from a Liverpool fan. Sarim's a Liverpool fan, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, Kylian Mbappe, as I reported, won't rush into any decisions, and summer 2024 could see him leave on a free. But the reason PSG are calm is because they've got an actual binding keyword legal commitment that means even if he goes on a free now, the club still make money. And as a consequence, there's not this bad blood now and feeling that Mbappe is somehow betraying PSG by leaving on a free and then them not getting a fee. So one possibility is summer 2024 Real Madrid. And if Mbappe goes on a free, then PSG will still make money and Real Madrid will get their man. But don't rule out an extension at PSG. And that extension could be to stay until at least 2025, or it could be to leave in the summer and put a release clause. If there's a release clause, Real Madrid still could pay it, but it will likely mean that Mbappe is offered a lower sign-on fee. And this is another thing I think a lot of fans sometimes need clarity on. A free transfer is never a free transfer, because if a player like Mbappe knows he's a free transfer, then he's going to ask for a bigger sign-on fee. There's going to be agents' fees. There's going to be wages. So Mbappe knows what he's worth. And he's basically saying to Real Madrid, if I'm a free, I want 130 million euros, which is probably the ballpark for a transfer fee. If Mbappe signs a new deal, then Real Madrid might have to pay the 130 million euros to PSG, but then Mbappe may get a lower sign-on fee. So either way, it costs money.
Which is why I've said it for years. Generally speaking, the way net spend is done in the newspapers doesn't exist really, because at the end of the day, it's more complicated than that, and it's boiled down. That's why some people don't understand the FFP situation, because like, well, the net spend is good. Well, is it? What have you paid in agent fees? How much have the wages gone up by? You look at Liverpool's model, and when they do well and win, the bonuses are so huge that for the following 18 months, their wage bill goes up to one of the highest in the world. That all factors into the costs of running a football club. And this idea of, well, we bought £100 million worth and we sold £80 million worth, that means we only spent 20 million, isn't true. Because some clubs spend lower transfer fees, but they pay exorbitant agent fees, as an example, because that's how they're able to get these deals so low. So there's so much that goes into it, to be fair.